Randu Blazak is the chair of the U.S. Coalition Against Hate Crime. Randy joins us from Portland, Oregon. Thank you for joining us on the NewsHour, Randy. Listen, let's talk about the overall picture in just a moment, but let's look at this specific killing of Tatiana Jefferson. Why do you think it happened? What do you think happened in this case? What would have been going through the minds of both Tatiana and the police officer?
Yes, there's an underlying issue here that is common among all people, which is the issue of implicit bias. That people learn these bigotries and biases very early in life, and they're kind of hardwired into the brain. And they vary. There are biases based on race, based on gender, but the bias based on race is really powerful in America, especially the bias that says black equals threat. And you can imagine yourself as the least racist person in the world, but these implicit biases are still at work and often cause you to act before you think. And when we look at the disproportionate number of African Americans who are killed by police, 25% of those who are killed by police are black, and that's only 12% of the population are black in this country. Some of that can be attributed to this notion of the unthought thought of acting on impulse before thinking, because the notion of a black person as a threat is more likely to lead to a police officer firing their weapon and ending tragically, as it did in this case in Texas.
So you're talking about institutionalized racism. It will be very interesting. In the brief research I didn't look for this figure, but I will definitely try to find it. How many black people are killed by black police officers? But I tell you what I did put into Google, Randy. I put list of black Americans killed by police officers in the United States. I came out with one article which is 20 pages long. It has more than 64 names. So this appears to indicate institutionalized racism.
Well, more than institutionalized, I mean, certainly it's woven into our institutions, but it's woven into the brain. And this is one of the things that's most challenging to work with, because everybody learns these biases, including those of us that work in this field, have these biases kind of stuck in the back of our heads. And usually we can deal with them. They may come out in an uncomfortable comment or an aside. Sometimes they come out when people are being hired because you just sort of automatically pick the person that's most like you. That's an example of implicit bias. But where it turns deadlier, when people have guns in their hands and see a black person, and immediately this sort of thing fires in their brain that they are under a threat of danger to themselves, and they pull the triggers. And so more than the institutions, I have to say the institutions have really taken on this issue of implicit bias, and there's much more training being done among law enforcement now to recognize it. It's hard to interrupt it because it is so woven into the fabric of our psyches that we learn this racism early on. So there's a lot of work to be done, not just within the institutions, but kind of on our own mental thinking processes about how we process race.
How much do you think American gun culture is also to blame? In other words, how might a police officer be thinking that in this situation, because this country is so heavily armed, I'm likely to get shot in the next few seconds, so I better shoot first?
Yeah, that's certainly a factor. I mean, we assume that everybody is loaded and ready to fire in this country. And so I think that puts police officers at an edge. We do know when we look at the data that crime rates and police shootings of unarmed black people are not correlated. These tend to happen in areas that actually have lower crime rates. So that fear of being a victim themselves among the police may be somewhat misguided. But again, there is this early learning process that weaves that fear into the heads of all people, not just law enforcement. This isn't about blaming law enforcement. This is about how all of us have internalized these racist messages about African American people.
Randy, thank you. That's Randu Blazak speaking to us from Portland, Oregon.